6 o'clock on the nose, and you're bang on time for Morning Prime. It is the 30th of May 2023. Can you believe it? Time really flies. May just checked in and now it's checking out. And we are also taking a stock of how that month has been politically as far as the bipartisan talks is concerned. Remember, today is a big day where we have Azimio La Umoja that will be holding their PJ meeting. And this is where Raila Odinga will be giving his direction moving forward as far as the bipartisan talks is concerned, which right now has collapsed because of the toing and froing from both divides, seeking some contentious issues, especially that of IBC, and also on the contentious issue of finance bill as well. But it seems this is a continuing debate, and I know we've had a bellyful of it so far, but it will continue until we see how that will pan out next week when the National Assembly resumes from recess. That will be June the 6th, and that also will be the hot table that, or the hot topic on the table that will be debated in Parliament. I'm joined this morning by Senator Boni Khalwale, who is the Majority Whip at the Senate, also the Senator of Kakamega. We'll be joined by Isaac Mwaura as well, who is the CAS that is in the office of Principal Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, and we'll be joined as well this morning by Dr. Makali Mulu, who is the Member of Parliament for Kitui Central. So we have a lot that we will be discussing today, and of course, you know the drill. You can head over to our Twitter handle. KTN News is our Twitter handle, where you can chime in, share your contribution, fire your questions, and we'll be having a handy opportunity to actually discuss that much later in the course of the program. But for now, as always, we put this horse into full run by looking at the dailies. We begin with the bold paper, where the Standard is holding this splash for you this morning. Ruto faces taxes rebellion among Mount Kenya MPs. Already there are murmurs, backbears, of course, interpretation regarding this in Mount Kenya, and everyone is eagerly waiting to see how that will pan out in the House. And of course, Azimio La Umoja has been particularly intent to make sure that the voting will be publicly displayed to see who will be voting for or against the finance bill so far. Ruto faces taxes rebellion among Mount Kenya MPs. Hustle plan. Elected leaders from the deputy president's backyard are an easy lot after attempts to make them embrace new tax measures have fallen flat. Locals instead want taxes reduced to make life more affordable. And this story continues on page 4 of the Standard this morning. And it says, we are not in the era where the government word was final. In this century, we need consultations, not just thumping. That is what Gathoni Wamushomba is saying. And so, with the MPs in the Rift Valley, the MPs in Mount Kenya, of course, we know how they will be voting. Everyone is eagerly waiting to see how this will be voted in the House as well. Africa's largest economy in hands of Bola Tinubu. He was sworn in yesterday. And of course, just after swearing in, he's already scrapped the fuel subsidy in Nigeria. And you can see the picture here. This is President Bola Tinubu waving to the crowd after taking oath of office as the 16th president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at the Eagle Square in Abuja. Tinubu took the oath of office alongside Kashim Shettima, who was sworn in as Nigeria's 15th vice president in a colorful ceremony presided over by Nigeria's Chief Justice Olukayode Ariwola. That story continues inside the Standard this morning, looking at the world news. Let's see what we have on top here at the teaser. County bosses fight at expense of service delivery. That is a story that you want to follow on page 14 and 15 of the Standard today. And Bank OK's Nairobi-Nakuru highway loan. This is on the business pages of the Standard this morning. Also remember, we have the financial standard that comes in handy for you every Tuesday. And you can get all the wiser as far as financial literacy is concerned. EPL season had a bit of everything. And you can follow all that in the sports pages of the Standard this morning. Let's move on and we see what we have also on the side. The hacking claim puts Kenya at center of US-China Cold War. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Standard on page 2. Incident last week cast a spotlight on the high-stakes competition between firms in the scramble for multi-billion shilling infrastructure tenders in Kenya. This is on page 2. Ruto hints at visa-free entry for Africans. That is a story that you can follow on page 27 yesterday. Of course, this meeting was held at Safari Park, where the African Free Trading, that is AfTA, was being shaken into place, and how we should harness that tyranny of numbers, I should say, that we have as African with intra-trade. Can we steamroll that, since now we have AfTA being launched and in place right now? And he's hinting at visa-free entry for Africans. And you can follow this story on page 27 of the Standard this morning. Let me show you what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation quickly. And this is what you're waking up to, the front page of the Daily Nation. A fund for every president, then loss of billions. A fund for every president, then loss of billions. Populist, that is what the flag is putting it here. It says, past audits have raised questions of the use of taxpayers' cash. Past audits have raised questions of the use of taxpayers' cash. And the faces of the former president and the current one also splashed here on the front page of the Daily Nation. Mwai Kibaki, these are the monies that were splashed during his regime. Women Enterprise Fund, Youth Enterprise Development Fund, Land Settlement Fund, Rural Enterprise Fund, National Humanitarian Fund, also Uhuru Kenyatta Uwezo Fund. We have National Government Affirmative Action Fund, that is NGAF. Let me go back to Mwai Kibaki. That was the figure given, 3.3 billion shillings. The Auditor General reported in 2019-2020 that the Women Enterprise Fund was still owed 3.37 billion shillings, out of which 80, it says here, 80 million shillings was doubtful at the time. Also, we have 4.6 billion shillings. By June 2021, more than 4.6 billion shillings reportedly lent by the Uwezo Fund to groups of women, youth, and people with disabilities across the country remain unpaid despite the expiration of the repayment period. Also, we can look at William Ruto, 9 billion shillings. This is the Hustler Fund and the Housing Fund. 9 billion shillings, the amount the government injected into the Hustler Fund within 2 months of its launch in December 2022, some 18 million Kenyans were expected to borrow from the initiative. The story continues inside the Daily Nation. And we have also the sub-headline reading, Wasteful. President Ruto is continuing a tradition by his predecessors, Uhuru Kenyatta and Mwai Kibaki, to create funds to provide solutions to socio-economic challenges. However, most of the funds have had duplicative roles, targeting the same populations, and have also had fundamental problems with the management, leading to losses and wastage, as accountability reports show. And you can follow these stories I've mentioned on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. On top here, looking at the teaser, Generation Z, dress code is king according to them. They care less about work, money, or current affairs. This is according to a new report from Aga Khan University, and you can follow the story there on page 12 of the Daily Nation. They don't really care a fig about work, money, or current affairs. Media owners are warning they will lose 2 billion shillings if finance bill is passed. And this is a story that you want to follow on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Media owners warn they will lose 2 billion shillings if finance bill is passed. And so we have unions joining this particular fray. The hue and cry that we've heard from the public regarding the finance bill so far. So media voices also, they've lent their voice on that particular cry. CIMCS vote 38-1 to kick out Deputy Governor. That is on the back page of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, extreme weather to worsen. Be warned. Kenya food, of course, extreme weather to worsen Kenya's food crisis. This is according to UN. Acute food insecurity is likely to worsen in Kenya, and 18 hunger hotspots covering 22 countries. A United Nations Outlook report for June to November is warning, and you can follow the story on page 14 of the Daily Nation this morning. A healthy nation comes in handy for you. Smart business as well inside the Daily Nation. Raila meets MPs as Kenya Kwanza moves to save talks. Azimio la Umoja One Kenya leader Raila Odinga will today chair a parliamentary group meeting of the coalition, whose resolution could reignite his clash with President William Ruto. This even as it emerged that the government is willing to heed to the opposition's 4 irreducible minimums to save the suspended bipartisan talks. Today marks the end of Mr. Odinga's 6-day ultimatum for the Kenya Kwanza side to address their major concerns. And the coalition had requested for preliminary action on the cost of living, preservation of electoral agencies, poll servers, also suspension of the IBC selection panel, and a cessation of interference with Azimio affiliate parties. This story continues on page 6 of the Daily Nation. This is how it looks. Let's move on to see People Daily. Unions in strike. Union in strike, threat of attacks. Civil servants oppose bill. Labour movement representing government workers send petition to opposition MPs asking them to reject finance bill over housing levy, even as they warn that they will paralyze services if Parliament passes. If Parliament passes it, and you have the story on page 4 of the People Daily this morning. Already you can see protesters here. This is some of the unions' contentious taxes that is being protested here is a housing fund, NAT, nurses, and other public sectors workers' unions oppose 3% levy, saying it will cause conflict between those with and without jobs. NHIF deductions, workers' representatives say this deduction will only fund corruption, but want employer to pay a shilling for a shilling. And also 35% tax on big pay. Workers now want this reduced to 25% because salaries have not been raised in 6 years. So those are the pertinent concerns and salient issues that are being raised by the union so far. On top here, we can see niceties being exchanged, and this is Uhuru Kenyatta. This is why I backed Raila. Ex-president reveals why he opposed Kenya's winner-take-all nature of politics ahead of handing over power fit in Nigeria. And this was happening yesterday with the inauguration of the new president. Churches move away from investing in schools, hospitals to venture into real estate. This is diversifying their portfolio. And you can follow the story on page 16 of the People Daily this morning. Haji found 17 graft case files wanting. Haji found 17 graft case files wanting. Now, you can read all the details there on page 2. And MCS votes to eject Orengo deputy in Rao. That is a story that is well splashed out for you on page 2 of the People Daily this morning. Shakahola, Raila abwaga Ruto. This is what is the headline here. Mahakama ya mpokeza rais pigo kwa kusimamisha shughuli za kamati ya kuchunguza vifo vya kidini Kilifi. That is a flag there. And it says kimenuka. Koti ya kubaliana na maoni ya Raila kuhusu uhalali wa rais kuteua kamati hiyo, mbali na kudai kuwa kiongozi wa nchi aliingilia uhuru wa mahakama alipomteua Jaji Lesit kuongoza kamati hiyo. That is the story that you want to follow on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning. Raila apanga mapambano yake upya. You can follow the story on page 3, and of course we'll be there on the ground to put out our ears and keep our eyes peeled to make sure we get the right information for you to relay on this particular parliamentary group meeting that Azimio will be holding today in the morning. Mashoga Uganda kusota jela maisha yote. That is a story that you can follow on page 8. Mashoga Uganda kusota jela maisha yote. That is a new development with the anti-homosexuality bill that was assented to by the president of Uganda yesterday, and has drawn, of course, sharp reactions from the international community rallying for the human rights that is enshrined in the United Nations Human Rights article. You can follow the story inside Taifa Leo today. Let's buckle down to some business where state is eyeing telco profits in tighter dominance rules. This is what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Draft fair competition regulations get ICT ministers nod. Past rules were not explicit on market power abuse. That is a story that you want to follow there on the front page of the Business Daily. And this is a story by Kefa Moirore, who is saying the Communication Authority of Kenya will start scrutinizing prices telecoms operators charge in relation to their profits when deciding abuse of market dominance in proposed changes to competition regulations. You can read the rest of the details there on page 2 of the Business Daily. Kenya reverse push by African nations to ditch the dollar. Kenya reverse push by African nations to ditch the dollar. And this is just following also a trend that is picking up in the world with de-dollarization and people moving to other reserves as well. You can follow that story inside the Business Daily. Passport printer breaks down again. Foreign investors snap up 5 local microfinance bank and safari hotels to tap into ecotourism fund. That is a story that you want to follow on page 14 of the Business Daily this morning. In Tanzania, government is speaking out on new agricultural trade rules. That is another story that you want to follow inside the Citizen, happening in Tanzania. And VP warns council of misuse of funds. SCT wants expeditious distribution of fertilizer. That story on page 3 of the Citizen. If you're waking up in Tanzania, we have the East African Al-Shabaab attack Uganda. 6 answers officials describe as sad and unfortunate news of deadly ambush in Somali base. And power play, we can see President Yoweri Museveni and Tanzania's Samia Suluhu Hassan at Kikagati in Isingiro district, Uganda, where they commissioned a joint hydropower project on May 25th, 2023. All right, China Daily is holding this for us this morning. Xi, speed up modernization of education. General Secretary stresses role of reform, innovation in development of sector, and also China to send fast civilian into space. China to send fast civilian into space. Remember also their aircraft, one of the maiden aircraft has been also launched in China. And that story, you can read it also inside the China Daily. And extended term, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his wife Emine Erdogan, how they can be seen here waving to supporters at the presidential palace at Ankara. You can read the rest of the details there on page 3 of the China Daily this morning. And of course, we shall be showing you the rest of international publications there. Time magazine looking at the future of medicine. But for now, that will be running on the split as we continue pace with the conversation. Allow me to introduce Boni Khalwale, who is the senator of Kakamega, also the majority whip in the Senate, to tell us where he has been. It's been a long time since he graced our screens here on KTN News. And just to thank him, because I know most of the time he's actually in Moshinani. Good to see you, sir. How are you? Good morning.
Thank you. I'm well.
Yes.
Long time no see.